another perception that I've always had is that because of the fact that your parents split up at some point and you're the elder brother, and with your two brothers, and I know both your brothers very well. I actually, when I left my first wife and got out of my first marriage, I actually moved into Slug's childhood home, and I slept in one of the one of the rooms in his childhood home because his brother had bought the house. So I'm really well acquainted with your brothers, and I wonder how much did you, being the big brother in a house where your dad was around but he wasn't in the house, how much of you being the big brother really kind of primed you and fostered this nurturing kind of leader? Because you're an alpha leader, but not in the way that a lot of men are. You never give other people directions, and you really do it by love and service and kindness and things like that. And then people come to you and ask you for things. And I wonder how much of that is just being a big brother in the family you're in.
That was one of probably my first, I guess, big ideas or big theories when I started to attempt to break open my own ego years ago, was that because of how much of a role I played with my other two brothers, whether that was the role of telling them, you better go get ready for school, you're going to be late, because mom's already at work. Somebody's got to be there to nag or to make sure things are on track, or make sure somebody's getting a snack after school, or make sure that, the medicines that one of them might need is being taken. All of these things did create a person who was overly parental with my friends and with my colleagues. I see it now. At the time, I was like, well, I'm a little bit older than a lot of my peers were actually a few years younger than me. When God Loves Ugly happened, I was 30, which is kind of late for an artist to break. And most of my friends were 25 and under. I shouldn't say friends, I should say colleagues, peers. Most of the other MCs that were in that same box were 5 years younger than me. And so that reflex or that muscle memory of being parental with them, it wasn't me being like, you got to do this. It was like, here's, what I think you should do. Here's some unsolicited advice, or here's, or maybe we're talking, but I'll break it all down for you. And it was that weird parentalness that I have with my, and it's interesting because as a parent, it's still there. It's just obviously I've had time to try to help it evolve to something that's a little bit more that works smoother, But I mean, my own kids will probably eventually be able to tell you, he wasn't like, hey, do this. He was like, I think you should do this. I really think you should go clean your room, instead of just being like, boy, go clean your room, And I think all of that is relative to how I was with my siblings, how I was with my friends, you know what I mean? And I'm working on it. I'm trying to learn how to be a little bit more direct with it, because what happens is I think in time it starts to come off as a weird passive lecture instead of it being like, just like, hey, this is what needs to happen right now. I know that's not what you asked, but
that's exactly
okay,
that is that's exactly what I was hoping for. So this is a relationship that and I want to come back to that, because I think that because of you taking that leadership role, and because of the fact that you are a few years older than some of us, and that made a big difference. Like when I met you, I was 19 or 20, and you were like 25, which is like a generation, you know what I mean? Which is like, you were an elder. It was almost like, yes, sir.
I was a boomer.
And I think that ended, my observation is that put you in a place where people had expectations of leadership of you that you didn't necessarily sign up for. You weren't trying to be anybody's boss or leader. You were trying to be a servant who a lover and servant who maybe had something to offer people. I'm gonna come back to that. But before we leave this family dynamic thing, the way that you relate to other men is in a very caretaking role. But I also know that your role in your house, that there was a very kind of specific relationship with your mom. And rather than me make any observation about that, we've learned so much in your music about your relationships with women. And I just wonder if you could share with us, how did your relationship with your mom shape the way that you engage with women?
Yeah, that's something I'm still working on. That's something I'm still trying to fully wrap my head around.
Do we have any Kleenex up here we can?
My relationship with my mother was that she was really young when she had me, and then she had 2 more kids. So by the time she was, 24, she had 3 kids already. And she was in, full swing adulthood, working her way towards a pension at that point. You know what I mean? And so it's like when her and my father split, the void that was there, not because my father wasn't still interested in making sure everybody was good, but just because he wasn't there for her to turn to. So I became the person she would turn to. And she was careful to not create a best friend relationship with me. And I right now, looking back on that, I think that's perfect. I'm glad that didn't happen, and I'm glad that she had the foresight to still hold a certain rank with me. But the fact that she could confide in me, or she could turn to me to complain about things in her life, or she could show certain elements of what was troubling her to her child that maybe I wasn't necessarily fully ready for. And so I think that now when I see certain types of distress or duress, or there's triggers that go off in me now that I won't say fight or flight, but they give me a type of reaction that I've, now after obviously years and years of watching myself, like I now know how to like try to keep better control of that type of reaction, because it's like I don't want to be triggered by somebody else's stress. I just want to be there to listen. I just want to be there to hear. And I'll say it's also something I do with men. It's different, but it's still similar in the sense of when I see somebody going through it, I don't want to just leave, but part of me does. Part of me wants to just be like, yo, let me just back out of this room. Like that Homer Simpson meme where he goes into the trees. But that's never what happens. What happens is I try to solve it. I jump in and I'm like, how can I come in here and save the day, And it's, I from the bottom of my heart, I can tell anybody, I've never wanted to save the day for anybody. It's not something that I aspired to do, but it's just something that would kick in and make me feel like I had to somehow solve this problem for you,
I wonder if you could talk about that, the thing that I mentioned earlier, where it really seems as though because of the fact that you've been a leader, whether you wanted to or not. I can't remember who asked me. Somebody asked me how long I thought I'd be allowed atop the trash heap. I didn't answer. I'm tired of criticizing. You know what I'm saying? Like this idea that you have done the things that you thought would be next steps the entire time. Like there was never a master plan. There was never a grand design. It always felt like in each moment in life and in music and in business and in the family, that's like, what's the next best thing for me to do? But because of that, you've helped chart the course for so many people who couldn't figure out the next thing to do. And then it feels like it created a feeling of people towards you with the expectation that if you're our leader, you're supposed to lead us in a certain way. And these things that people desired of you that you didn't necessarily sign up for. Does that make sense? And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
That does make sense. And
because I did. And I didn't realize until years later, and we've had this conversation, but there are things that I expected of you that you never, that would never communicate it. But just because you were always in a leadership role and I always looked up to you so much, there are expectations that I had to really eventually look at myself with.
I like how you articulated that. I never chose the role of leader. In fact, even if you try to put it on me aggressively, I know boundaries. I don't want that. And it's not because of anything other than I don't want the responsibility of feeling like somehow I had anything to do with your misery or Your success, for that matter, I don't want credit for your success. I want you to have that credit. But I also don't want credit for your lack of success.